The CEO was halfway through calling the delivery driver a worthless nobody when the first gunshot echoed through the lobby. Glass shattered. People screamed. The executive dove behind the reception desk, but the courier yanked him down by his $1,000 tie. "Stay quiet," he whispered, "or you're dead." The CEO had no idea the man he'd been mocking had spent 10 years as a Tier 1 special operations operator. He was about to find out. Derek Salinger did not know the name of the man who delivered his lunch every day. He didn't need to. Derek was the CEO of Ash Grove Capital, 40 stories of glass and steel in downtown Chicago, and men like the delivery driver did not exist in his world. They were background noise, furniture that moved. The driver's name was Cole Bishop. He was 36 years old, 6 feet tall, built like a man who had spent a decade doing things most people would not believe. He wore a gray delivery jacket with a coffee logo stitched on the chest. He carried a paper bag with a sandwich and a bottle of water. He walked into the lobby of Ash Grove Tower at 12:15 every single day. Nobody in that building knew that 6 years ago, Cole had pulled 2 wounded teammates out of a burning compound under fire, alone, with a broken hand. Nobody knew he had walked away from that life, not because he wanted to, but because the Army had quietly discharged him after a mission went wrong in a way the official reports never explained. Nobody knew that for the last 4 months, he had been doing something far more dangerous than delivering sandwiches. He had been watching Derek Salinger. Not for money. Not exactly. 3 months ago, a woman named Iris Calloway had knocked on Cole's apartment door. She was the founder of Ash Grove Capital, the woman Derek had pushed out in a boardroom coup 2 years earlier, then quietly kept as a consultant so the press wouldn't ask questions. Iris still owned 5% of the company. She still had eyes inside it. "Something is wrong at Ash Grove," she told Cole. "Money is disappearing. Real money. Hundreds of millions. And every time I ask questions, the answers change. That's not my problem," Cole had said. "It will be. I think someone is going to make sure the truth never gets out, and I think they'll use force to do it." Cole didn't believe her. Not fully. But Iris had once given him a job when no one else would hire a soldier with a quiet, unexplained discharge. He owed her. So he took the cover job. Delivery driver, invisible, inside the building every day, and he watched. For 3 months, nothing happened. Today, everything did. At 12:14 p.m., Cole Bishop walked toward the revolving doors of Ash Grove Tower, carrying a paper bag with Derek Salinger's lunch inside it. He didn't know it yet, but in exactly 90 seconds, 4 armed men were going to walk through those same doors behind him. And he was the only person in the building who would know what to do about it. Before we jump back into the story, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. And if you're enjoying this story, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow's episode reveals even more than you can imagine. Derek Salinger stood in the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, loud enough that everyone within 30 feet could hear him. "I don't care what the board thinks," he snapped. "I built this company. I decide who stays." He hung up and turned, and that's when he saw Cole walking toward the elevator bank with the paper bag. "Hey!" Derek snapped his fingers like he was calling a dog. "You, delivery boy." Cole stopped. He didn't react to the tone. He'd been called worse things by worse men in worse places. "My sandwich better not be cold again," Derek said, loud enough for the security guards to hear, loud enough for the receptionist to duck her head and pretend to type. "Last week it was cold. You know what that tells me? It tells me you don't respect my time. People like you never do." "It's not cold," Cole said. His voice was flat, calm. Derek stepped closer, sizing him up the way rich men sometimes do, like they're checking a price tag. "What are you, some college dropout who couldn't cut it? Or did daddy not pay for school?" A few people near the elevators laughed nervously. Not because it was funny, but because that's what people do when the most powerful man in the room is being cruel, and they're afraid of being next. Cole said nothing. He handed over the bag. "Say thank you," Derek said, "for the tip I'm not giving you." "You're welcome," Cole said. And something in the way he said it, quiet, even, without a flicker of anger, made Derek's assistant, Priya Anand, glance up from her tablet with a strange, uneasy feeling she couldn't name. Derek turned and walked toward the elevator, already forgetting the exchange, already moving on to the next person he'd belittle that day. Cole stood there for one more second. Then he heard it. Tires screeching outside. Too fast. Too close. He turned toward the revolving doors just as a black cargo van jumped the curb outside Ashgrove Tower, and 4 men in tactical vests stepped out, rifles already up. Cole's whole body went cold and still in the way it used to when a mission turned real. This is what Iris warned me about. The first man raised his rifle toward the glass doors. "Get down!" Cole shouted, and the first shot went off before anyone could move. Glass exploded inward. People screamed and dropped to the marble floor. The receptionist ducked under her desk, hands over her head. A businessman near the elevators froze completely, too stunned to run. Cole didn't freeze. 10 years of training took over before his mind even finished processing the danger. He grabbed the nearest person, which happened to be Derek Salinger, still turning toward the sound, still too slow, still soft from a decade of boardrooms, and hauled him down behind the reception desk by his silk tie. "Stay quiet," Cole hissed, "or you're dead." Derek's eyes were wide, his breathing already ragged with panic. "What? Who are you?" "Shut up." Cole peeked over the desk for half a second. 4 shooters, moving in a loose diamond formation, professional spacing, not panicked, not amateur. These men had done this before. That told Cole everything he needed to know. This wasn't a robbery. Robbers don't move like that. This was an operation. "They're going to sweep the lobby," Cole said quietly, mostly to himself, mapping the room the way he'd been trained to. 2 exits behind reception. Stairwell to the east, 40 feet away, currently exposed. Elevator bank, useless. The shooters were between them and it. "Who are you?" Derek whispered again, voice shaking. Cole ignored him. He was watching the shooters' boots under the gap beneath the reception desk. 3 pairs, moving left. 1 pair stationary near the door. A watcher. That was the tell. Real crews always left a man on the exit. "There are 5 floors of people in this building," Cole muttered. "They're not here for cash." Derek's face went pale. "What do you mean they're not here for cash?" Cole finally looked at him, and for the first time, Derek saw something in the delivery driver's eyes that had nothing to do with sandwiches or tips. It was the look of a man calculating exactly how many seconds he had before someone died, and exactly what he was willing to do about it. "They're here for someone," Cole said, "and I think it's you." A voice boomed through the lobby, amplified, calm, almost bored. "Derek Salinger. We know you're in here. Come out now, and everyone else walks away. Hide, and we start clearing this building floor by floor." Derek's whole body started to shake. Cole's hand closed around his arm, hard as a vice. "Don't you dare move," he said. 2 floors up, in the executive suite, a man named Warren Ellery stood at his office window, watching the chaos unfold in the plaza below, his hands folded calmly behind his back. Warren was Ashgrove's chief operating officer. He had worked beside Derek for 9 years. He had stood at Derek's wedding. He had held Derek's newborn daughter at the hospital. He was, by every appearance, Derek's closest friend in the company. He was also the reason 4 armed men were currently standing in the lobby. 3 years ago, Warren had begun quietly rerouting client funds through a shell account he controlled. Nothing dramatic at first, just enough to cover a bad investment he'd made with his own money, a mistake he was too proud to admit. Then it became a habit. Then it became a hole he couldn't climb out of. $212 million, moved in small enough pieces that no single transaction ever raised a flag. Until last month, when Derek, sharp about numbers if nothing else, ordered a full internal audit to clean the books before the IPO. Warren had 6 days before that audit reached the account he'd hidden it in. He had panicked, and panicked men make desperate choices. He hadn't hired killers, not exactly. He'd hired a man named Victor Kessler, a private resolution specialist, who promised the problem would disappear along with the evidence, and, if necessary, along with Derek. Warren told himself it wouldn't come to that. He told himself Kessler would simply destroy the servers, wipe the audit files, make it look like a break-in. But Kessler had a rifle team standing in the lobby right now, and Warren was starting to understand, with a sick drop in his stomach, that Kessler had never planned to just steal data. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Kessler, target hasn't come out. Lobby's locked down. We're sweeping floor by floor until we find him. This was the deal. Don't get soft now. Warren stared at the message, his hands trembling. He had built this fire to save himself. Now it was burning through the whole building, and he had no idea how to put it out. Behind the reception desk, Derek Salinger was still shaking, still whispering demands that Cole tell him what was happening, who these men were, why this was happening to him, always to him, even now. Cole wasn't listening. He was doing math. 4 shooters, 1 watcher by the door, 3 sweeping the ground floor, moving toward the east stairwell. Standard tactic. Clear the lobby, lock the exits, push upward. They'd hold 30, maybe 40 hostages on the lower floors as leverage while they hunted for their real target, which was the man currently gripping Cole's sleeve like a child afraid of the dark. "You need to tell me what's going on," Derek hissed. "Do you know these people? Is this because of a deal I turned down? Because of the merger?" "It doesn't matter right now," Cole said. "It matters to me." Cole finally turned and looked at him directly, and his voice dropped low enough that only Derek could hear it. 10 years ago, I pulled 2 men out of a burning building while people were shooting at me from 3 directions," Cole said. "I've done things you can't imagine to keep people alive who never said thank you. So right now, the only thing that matters is whether you can stay quiet and follow instructions, because that is the only thing standing between you and a body bag. Can you do that?" Derek stared at him. The mocking, condescending executive from 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a man who suddenly understood, in the marrow of his bones, that he was completely out of his depth. "Yes," Derek whispered. "Good," Cole said. "Then listen carefully." He glanced over the desk again. The stationary watcher near the door had turned, scanning the lobby slowly. 30 seconds, maybe less, before he checked behind the reception desk. "There's a maintenance corridor behind this desk," Cole said. "Goes to a service stairwell. It's not on their floor plan. I checked it weeks ago, back when I thought I was being paranoid for no reason." You checked the building's maintenance corridors?" Derek whispered, stunned. "Why would a delivery driver do that?" Cole didn't answer, because right then, the watcher by the door turned fully toward the reception desk and started walking straight toward them. Cole made a decision in under a second, the way he'd been trained to for a decade. "Go," he whispered, pushing Derek toward the gap in the paneling behind the desk. "Now, quiet." Derek scrambled through the narrow service door, more terrified than he'd ever been in his life, into a dim concrete corridor that smelled like dust and old pipes. Cole didn't follow immediately. He grabbed the desk phone's cord, thin, plastic-coated, useless as a weapon to anyone who hadn't spent a decade learning exactly how not useless it could be, and wrapped it twice around his fist. The watcher rounded the desk, rifle raised, already opening his mouth to call out to his team. Cole moved. He came up from behind the desk low and fast, driving his shoulder into the man's ribs before the rifle could swing around, slamming him into the marble pillar hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. The rifle clattered to the floor. Cole's forearm was already across the man's throat, the cord looping tight, cutting off sound before it could become a shout. 15 seconds. That's all it took. The man went limp. Cole eased him to the floor behind the desk, out of sight, and grabbed the rifle. An AR pattern carbine, suppressed, well-maintained. Professional gear. This confirmed what Cole already suspected. Whoever hired this crew had money, and this was not a smash and grab. He checked the mag. Full. He slung it across his back rather than carrying it visibly. The last thing he needed was Derek's terrified assistant, or some fleeing office worker mistaking him for one of the attackers and screaming his position to the whole lobby. He slipped through the service door and pulled it shut behind him. Derek was crouched in the dark corridor, hyperventilating. "Did you—" Derek's voice cracked. "Did you just—" "He's alive," Cole said. "Unconscious. Move." "You just took down an armed man with a phone cord. Move," Cole repeated, and something in his voice made Derek's legs obey before his brain caught up. They moved deeper into the service corridor, and that's when a radio crackled on the unconscious man's belt behind them, loud in the concrete silence. "Perimeter check. Denny, report." No answer. "Denny, report." Cole froze. Derek froze beside him. "Denny's not responding. Something's wrong. All units, converge on the lobby, now." Cole's jaw tightened. They'd just lost the one advantage he'd been counting on. Time. 3 floors above the lobby, in the open-plan marketing department, a young analyst named Renee Ochoa was the first to notice something was wrong. Not because she heard the gunfire, which had been muffled by 40 floors of glass and steel, but because the building's PA system crackled on with a voice that made her blood run cold. "Attention! This is a security lockdown. All personnel are to remain in place. Do not attempt to leave your floor. Any attempt to reach the exits will be considered a hostile act." It wasn't the fire department. It wasn't building management. The voice was calm, controlled, and utterly without warmth. Renee looked around the office. 23 of her co-workers were frozen at their desks, staring at the ceiling speakers like the words might change if they listened hard enough. "That's not a real announcement," someone said. "That has to be some kind of drill." The elevator doors at the far end of the floor chimed. Everyone turned. 2 men in tactical gear stepped out, rifles raised, sweeping the room with the practiced ease of men clearing space after space, floor after floor. "Everybody down! Now! Hands where I can see them!" Renee dropped to the floor along with 24 screaming co-workers, and in that instant, she understood something that Cole Bishop had already understood 4 floors below her. This was not a drill. It was not a robbery. Whoever these men were, they intended to search every single floor of Ash Grove Tower until they found what, or who, they were looking for. And judging by the way they moved past desks, ignoring laptops and purses and wallets entirely, checking faces instead of pockets, Renee realized with a jolt of horror, they weren't looking for money. They were looking for a person. Warren Ellery stood frozen in his office, watching the security monitors that fed from the lobby cameras. Monitors he had access to only because he was the COO. Monitors that showed him, in grainy black and white, the unconscious body of the man he'd hired being dragged behind the reception desk. His stomach dropped. Someone took down one of Kessler's men. Who? He grabbed his phone and dialed Kessler directly, hands shaking. "Your man is down," Warren hissed the moment the call connected. "In the lobby. Someone took him out." There was a pause on the line, and when Kessler spoke, his voice was maddeningly calm. "Interesting. My men report the target hasn't left the lobby area. Someone's helping him." "This wasn't the plan," Warren said. "You said you'd find the servers, wipe the data, and get out. You said if Derek showed up, you'd scare him off. Plans change when people fight back, Kessler said. Doesn't matter. We control 4 floors. We control the exits. Whoever's helping your friend Salinger is 1 man against 16. It's a matter of time. 16? Warren's voice cracked. You told me you'd bring 4 men. I told you what you needed to hear to write the check, Warren. Kessler's tone didn't change at all. You want your $200 million of theft to disappear, along with the only man who could expose it. This is what that costs. Sit tight. Let us work. The line went dead. Warren stood in his office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that had no idea what was happening 40 floors below street level, and understood, for the first time with total, sickening clarity, that he was no longer the man giving orders. He had built a monster to save himself, and the monster had decided it liked the taste of blood more than the taste of money. Cole and Derek moved through the maintenance corridor in near silence, following the dim emergency lighting toward the service stairwell Cole had scouted weeks earlier. You need to explain this to me, Derek whispered, still shaking, but the fear was starting to curdle into something else, the beginning of suspicion. You knew about this corridor. You took down an armed man like it was nothing. Who are you? Cole paused at a junction, listening. Distant footsteps, 2 floors up. Boots on tile, moving in formation. Does it matter right now? Cole asked. It matters to me whether the man I'm trusting with my life used to be a criminal or a cop or... I was a soldier, Cole said flatly. Special operations. 10 years. I don't do that anymore. Derek stared at him. Then why are you delivering sandwiches? Cole's jaw tightened, and for a moment, something raw crossed his face. Something that had nothing to do with the gunman in the building, and everything to do with a wound that had never fully closed. Because after 10 years of keeping people alive who never knew my name, Cole said quietly, the Army decided I was more trouble discharged than promoted. Long story, not one I owe you. Derek opened his mouth to say something, probably something cruel, out of old habit, the same instinct that made him mock a delivery driver for a cold sandwich 20 minutes ago. But the words died in his throat, because for the first time in longer than he could remember, Derek Salinger was face to face with a man he could not buy, could not fire, and could not intimidate. A man who, right now, was the only reason he was still breathing. Why are you protecting me? Derek asked instead, quieter. Cole was quiet for a long moment. I wasn't planning to, he admitted. I was watching this building because someone thinks your company is hiding something ugly. I didn't expect it to turn into this. Derek's face went pale in the dim light. What do you mean, hiding something? Before Cole could answer, a radio crackled from the rifle slung across his back, the frequency the unconscious guard had been using. East Stairwell Team, converge on Sub-Level 2. We think the target's using service corridors. Sweep them all. Cole's eyes snapped toward the stairwell door 30 feet ahead. They were about to walk directly into the men hunting them. Cole grabbed Derek's arm and pulled him hard to the left, away from the stairwell, into a narrow gap between a bank of electrical panels and a concrete support column. Don't move. Don't breathe loud, Cole whispered. Footsteps echoed down the stairwell seconds later. 2 men, rifles up, moving in careful, practiced steps. Cole watched them through a half-inch gap between the panels, cataloging everything. Gear, spacing, the way one man's finger rested just outside the trigger guard. Disciplined, trained. Military background, most of them, Cole thought. Contractors. Hired guns, not street thugs. This was planned for months. The 2 men swept the corridor, flashlights cutting through the dark, missing the gap where Cole and Derek pressed themselves against cold concrete. One of them paused less than 10 feet away, scanning slowly. Derek's breathing hitched, panic climbing his throat. Cole's hand found his shoulder and pressed down, firm, grounding. Steady, the touch said, without a single word. The gunman's radio crackled. Clear on sub 2. Moving to sub 3. The footsteps retreated. The stairwell door clicked shut. Cole exhaled slowly and turned to Derek, whose face had gone the color of old paper. "They're searching level by level," Cole said quietly. 16 men, according to what I just heard. That's not a robbery crew. That's a small army, and someone paid a fortune to put it in this building. 16, Derek whispered. "For me? For something," Cole said. "You tell me. What's worth killing 40 floors of people to keep quiet?" Derek's face changed, confusion sliding slowly into a terrible, dawning realization. "The audit," he breathed. Cole's eyes sharpened. "What audit?" 6 days ago, I ordered a full internal audit of every account at Ashgrove," Derek said, voice shaking now for an entirely new reason. "Warren said it was routine, pre-IPO cleanup. I didn't think—" "Warren," Cole repeated. "Who's Warren?" "My COO," Derek said. "My friend. He's had access to every financial system in this company for 9 years." Somewhere above them, muffled through concrete and steel, another burst of gunfire echoed. A warning shot, or a door being blown open, or something worse. Cole's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went colder. "Where's his office?" Cole asked. 40th floor, Derek said. "Top of the building." Cole looked up, as if he could see straight through 40 floors of concrete to the man who'd started all of this. "Then that's where we're going," he said. He reached for the stairwell door and stopped cold. Boots. Directly on the other side, close enough to hear the scrape of gravel on the sole. Not passing by. Waiting. Someone had heard them. 2 miles away, in a small downtown apartment overlooking the river, Iris Calloway sat in front of 3 monitors, watching the local news feed cut live to a helicopter shot of Ashgrove Tower. Police cars swarming the plaza, SWAT vans rolling in, reporters already speculating about an active shooter situation. Her hands were steady on the keyboard, but her heart was hammering. "I was right," she thought. "God help me, I was right, and I sent a man in there anyway." She'd given Cole a burner phone months ago, in case things ever escalated. She dialed it now, praying he still had it on him. It rang twice before he picked up, his voice a tight whisper. "Not a good time, Iris. I'm watching the news," she said. "Is Derek alive?" "For now," Cole said. "There are at least 16 shooters in this building. Professional. Military-grade gear. They're not robbing the place, Iris. They're hunting for something." Iris's stomach turned to ice. "The audit files." "That's what Derek thinks," Cole said. "He's pointing at his COO, man named Warren." Iris closed her eyes. She had suspected Warren for over a year. Quiet inconsistencies in quarterly filings, numbers that never quite added up, the kind of thing that only someone who'd built the company from nothing would ever notice. She'd tried to warn Derek 18 months ago. He'd laughed her out of the building, told her she was bitter about losing her seat on the board. "Cole, listen to me," Iris said. "If Warren's behind this, he didn't build an army like that himself. He hired someone. Which means somewhere in that building, there's a man calling the shots who was never planning to leave witnesses." "I know," Cole said quietly. "Get Derek out," Iris said. "Forget the money. Forget the truth. Just get him out alive." There was a pause on the line, long enough that Iris's chest tightened with dread. "I can't just get him out," Cole finally said. "There are 40 floors of employees in this building, and these men aren't leaving until they either find Derek or run out of floors to search. If I run, they keep hunting. If I hide, more people die looking for us. Cole, I have to end this from the inside," Cole said. "Before SWAT breaches and gets 100 people killed in a crossfire nobody outside understands." "That's insane," Iris breathed. "It's the only option that doesn't get children calling their moms from a stairwell tonight," Cole said. "I have to go." The line clicked dead. Iris stared at the monitors. at the helicopter footage circling the tower like a vulture, and whispered to an empty apartment the only thing she could do. "Please don't die in there, Cole." Cole held perfectly still, hand frozen on the stairwell door, listening to the boots on the other side shift, pause, then move on, unhurried, following a sweep pattern instead of stopping to check the handle. A patrol, not an ambush. Not yet. He let out a slow breath and eased back from the door. Back in the stairwell shadows, he turned to Derek, whose face had gone gray with the weight of everything he'd just overheard on the call with Iris. "You said 16 shooters," Derek whispered. "You, against 16 armed men. Are you insane?" "I'm not going to fight 16 men head-on," Cole said. "That's not how this works. You don't win a fight like this with force. You win it with information, timing, and making them think there are more of you than there really are." "How do you even—" "Because I've done it before," Cole said simply, and something in the flatness of his voice told Derek not to ask for details. Cole crouched and pulled the rifle off his back, checking the mag again, his hands moving with the unhurried precision of a man who had done this exact motion 1,000 times in 1,000 different kinds of darkness. "Here's what's going to happen," Cole said. "I'm going to get you to the 40th floor. Along the way, we're going to find out exactly how deep Warren's involvement goes, and we're going to make sure the police outside know it's not just a hostage situation. It's evidence of a $200 million fraud that somebody's trying to bury in blood. And if we run into more of them—" Cole's eyes met his, steady and calm in a way that should have been impossible, given everything happening around them. "Then I do what I was trained to do," Cole said. "And you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, without arguing. Understood?" Derek, the man who 10 minutes ago had mocked this same man for a cold sandwich, the man who hadn't taken an order from anyone in over a decade, nodded without hesitation. "Understood," he said. Cole rose, rifle low and ready, and eased the stairwell door open, following the patrol's path rather than the direct route up. A longer way, but a quieter one. 3 steps in, he stopped again. The patrol that had passed them wasn't alone. Through the gap in the next landing's door, a second set of boots waited, motionless, facing the exact stairwell they needed to cross. They weren't patrolling anymore. They were posted, which meant somebody already suspected exactly which way Cole and Derek were headed. Cole backed away from the gap without a sound, pulling Derek into the shadow of a maintenance alcove until the posted guard's silhouette lost interest and drifted back toward the landing rail. It bought them an opening, barely, and Cole took it, guiding Derek up a service ladder bolted to the shaft wall instead of the stairwell the guard was watching. They climbed in silence, floor by floor, Cole checking each landing before allowing Derek through, moving with a discipline that made Derek feel, for the first time in his adult life, genuinely small. On the 12th floor landing, Cole froze mid-step, one hand raised, voices, close, just beyond the stairwell door. "Said the target's somewhere between 6 and 15. Command wants 2-man sweeps on every floor, no exceptions." "Copy. What about the hostages on 8 and 9? "Hold them. If Kessler doesn't get his man in 20 minutes, he wants a message sent. One of them gets walked to a window where the cameras outside can see." Derek's blood went cold. Cole's face didn't change, but his grip on the rifle tightened almost imperceptibly. A message. That meant they were planning to kill a hostage on camera to force Derek out. That changed the timeline completely. Cole pulled Derek back down 2 steps, out of earshot, and crouched low. "They're going to hurt someone on 8 or 9 if I don't show myself in 20 minutes, Derek whispered, horror dawning on his face. "I have to." "You're not walking out there," Cole said flatly. "People are going to die because of me." "People are going to die because of Warren," Cole corrected, low and sharp. "Don't you dare take that weight. It's not yours to carry, and right now it's not helping anyone." "Then what do we do?" Cole was already moving, mind racing through options at a speed Derek couldn't follow. I go to 8, Cole said, quietly. I find out exactly who's holding those hostages and how many. You go to 40th floor, alone, through the north stairwell, which I scouted 3 weeks ago and which isn't watched because it only connects to the executive suite. You find whatever Warren's hiding. Photos, files, anything. We need proof before this ends, or the truth dies in this building along with everyone else. Derek's eyes went wide. You want me to go up there alone? You built this company, Cole said. You know it better than any of Kessler's men ever will. I need eyes on evidence, and I need to make sure nobody executes an innocent person on camera in the next 20 minutes. We split up. It's the only way we do both. Derek stared at him, terror and something like grudging respect warring on his face. And if I run into one of them? Cole pressed something small and cold into Derek's palm. A folding knife. The unconscious guard's backup blade. Then you fight, Cole said, because giving up isn't a choice anymore. Not for either of us. Somewhere below them, a scream echoed up the stairwell, short, cut off, and utterly terrifying. Cole's eyes hardened. Go, he said. Now. Derek Salinger had not climbed a set of stairs without a personal trainer beside him in over 15 years. So now he was climbing 28 flights alone, in the dark, a stranger's knife shaking in his sweaty grip, every creak of the building sounding like a footstep behind him. You built this company, Cole had said. You know it better than any of them. It was true, in a way Derek hadn't thought about in years. He knew every service corridor because he'd fought the original architects over cost overruns during construction. He knew the north stairwell was unmonitored because he'd once complained, furiously, that the security budget for cameras was wasteful, a decision made out of arrogance that was now, absurdly, the thing keeping him alive. He reached the 38th floor landing, lungs burning, and froze. Voices, below him, climbing, said check every stairwell twice. Commands getting impatient. Derek's heart slammed against his ribs. He looked up, 2 more flights to the executive floor, and down, where flashlight beams were sweeping closer. There was nowhere to hide on an open stairwell landing. He gripped the knife, hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it, and pressed himself into the shadowed corner beside the stairwell door, praying, for the first time in longer than he could remember, to anyone who might be listening. The footsteps grew louder. A flashlight beam swept across the landing and stopped, inches from where Derek stood frozen in the dark. Hold up, a voice said. I think I saw something. While Derek froze in the dark 30 floors above, Cole moved silently through the service corridor toward the 8th floor, rifle low, every sense alert. He found the hostages exactly where the radio chatter said they'd be. 11 employees zip-tied and seated against the far wall of the open office floor. 2 gunmen pacing near the windows, occasionally glancing at their watches. 20-minute deadline, Cole thought grimly, which means I have maybe 12 minutes left. He studied the room through the gap in a half-open door. 2 shooters, both facing the hostages, backs partially toward the entrance. Amateur mistake, born of overconfidence. They thought they controlled the floor completely. Cole slipped inside, silent as smoke, and closed the distance in 11 long, controlled strides before either man registered movement. He took the first man down with a strike to the throat that dropped him without a sound, then swept the second man's legs before he could turn, driving an elbow into his temple hard enough to end the fight in a single blow. 11 hostages stared up at him in stunned silence, hands still bound. I'm not with them, Cole said quietly, already moving to cut the first zip tie with the confiscated knife. There's a SWAT perimeter outside. When I get you to the stairwell, go down, hands up, keep your palms visible so nobody outside mistakes you for a shooter. Go quickly. Don't stop for anyone. Who are you? One of the hostages whispered, echoing the exact question Derek had asked twice already. Cole didn't answer. He was already moving to the next zip tie, and the next, working with the calm, practiced efficiency of a man who had done this exact thing in far worse places than a Chicago office building. Through the earpiece he'd taken off the first gunman in the lobby, Cole caught fragments of the wider operation. Kessler's voice, distributing his 16 men in a pattern Cole recognized instantly. 4 holding the lobby and exits, 2 on every hostage floor, 6 floors deep, to keep panic contained. That left Kessler's core team of 6 free to hunt the executive floors, the only men trained enough for close quarters work if Derek was cornered. 10 men holding ground, 6 men hunting, Cole thought. SWAT will deal with the 10 once they breach. I only have to survive the 6. As the last hostage stood, rubbing raw wrists, a radio clipped to one of the unconscious gunmen crackled to life. Team 4, status check. We have a situation on 38. Think we spotted the target near the executive stairwell. Converging now. Cole's blood ran cold. Derek. He shoved the last hostage toward the stairwell exit. Go, now. And then he ran. Not toward safety, but straight toward the 38th floor, toward the man he'd promised, without ever quite meaning to, that he would keep alive. On the 38th floor landing, the flashlight beam held steady on the shadowed corner, where Derek Salinger pressed himself against cold concrete, knife trembling in his fist, certain this was the moment he died. I think I saw something, the gunman repeated, stepping closer, rifle rising. Derek's mind raced through every option and found none. He was not a fighter. He was a man who won arguments with lawyers and spreadsheets, not a man who survived armed confrontations in stairwells. But he thought of Cole's voice, low and steady. Giving up isn't a choice anymore. As the gunman's flashlight beam crossed his face and a shout of discovery rose in the man's throat, Derek did the only thing he could think to do. He threw himself forward, knife first, driven by pure animal terror rather than any skill. And it was clumsy, and it was desperate, and it caught the gunman completely off guard because no soft-handed executive was supposed to fight back. The blade caught the man's forearm as the rifle discharged wildly into the ceiling, deafening in the concrete stairwell, plaster raining down. They crashed to the landing together, grappling, the gunman far stronger, far more trained, already turning the fight in his favor within seconds. And then the stairwell door above them exploded open. Cole hit the gunman like a freight train, driving him off Derek and into the concrete wall with brutal, controlled force, ending the fight in under 3 seconds with a strike that left the man motionless on the landing. Cole hauled Derek to his feet, breathing hard, eyes scanning him for injury. "You're bleeding," Cole said, nodding at a shallow cut on Derek's forearm from the struggle. "I'm alive," Derek gasped, staring at the man he'd nearly killed, at the knife still clutched in his shaking hand. I fought back." "You did," Cole said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Now we don't have much time. That shot was loud. Every team in this building heard it." As if summoned by the words, radios crackled to life throughout the stairwell below them, voices sharp with urgency. "Shots fired, 38. All teams converge." Cole's jaw tightened. "2 flights to the executive suite," he said. "We need to move. Now." They reached the 40th floor, breathless, Cole clearing the corridor with brutal efficiency, before waving Derek forward. Warren Ellery's office door was slightly ajar. Cole pushed it open with the muzzle of his rifle, and what they found made Derek's stomach drop. Warren stood at his desk, frantically shredding documents by hand, his face slick with sweat, his tie loosened, his eyes wild with panic. "Derek," Warren breathed, spinning around. "Thank God, you're alive. I was so worried." "Stop," Derek said, and his voice was cold in a way Cole had not heard from him yet. "Stop lying to me, Warren." "I know." Warren's face crumpled, the mask finally slipping. "Derek, I can explain. You hired these men," Derek said, his voice shaking now with rage instead of fear. "You put a small army in my building. People are dead because of you." "I never wanted this," Warren shouted, and for a moment, genuine anguish broke through the panic. "I made a mistake with an investment years ago, and I covered it, and then I had to keep covering it, and by the time your audit came, there was no way to fix it quietly, and Kessler said he'd just make the evidence disappear." $200 million, Derek said. "That's what Iris said was missing. She tried to warn me 18 months ago, and I laughed her out of this building." Warren flinched at the name. Cole's eyes never left Warren, rifle steady, but his attention had caught on something else entirely. A laptop open on the desk, a half-composed email visible on the screen, addressed to an offshore account manager. Evidence. Exactly what Iris had asked him to find. "Grab it," Cole said quietly to Derek, nodding at the laptop. "That's your proof." Derek moved toward the desk, and that's when Warren's hand darted toward the top drawer. Cole's rifle snapped up instantly. "Don't." But Warren wasn't reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a small handheld radio, and before Cole could stop him, he keyed it and shouted into it. "Kessler, they're in my office. 40th floor. Now, now." Cole ripped the radio from his hand and slammed him against the wall, but the damage was done. Every gunman still active in the building now knew exactly where their target was. "That was the last mistake you get to make today," Cole said, voice low and dangerous. Warren's face had gone the color of ash. "You don't understand," he whispered. "Kessler was never planning to let any of us walk out of here alive. Not you, not me, not anyone who could connect him to this. He's not cleaning up my mess anymore. He's erasing all of it, permanently." Somewhere below them, the elevator chimed. Far too close, far too soon. Cole's blood went cold. "How many men does he have with him right now?" Cole demanded. Warren swallowed hard. "His assault team. All 6 of the hunters are coming." The elevator doors on the executive floor slid open. Victor Kessler stepped off the elevator alone, unhurried, rifle slung casually across his chest, 6 of his remaining men fanning out behind him into the executive corridor. He was not what Derek expected. No mask, no shouting, no theatrical menace. Just a lean, gray-eyed man in his 50s with the calm, tired patience of someone who had done this exact job in a dozen countries and considered it, at this point, simply a profession. "Mr. Salinger," Kessler said, voice mild, almost pleasant, "you've caused me significantly more trouble than your friend Warren promised you would." "Kessler," Cole said, stepping slightly in front of Derek, rifle steady. Something flickered behind Kessler's eyes. Recognition, or close to it. "You're not building security," Kessler said slowly, studying Cole with new interest. "The way you move, the way you took down 4 of my men without a single shot fired until 38. Special operations. Which unit?" "Doesn't matter anymore," Cole said. "It matters to me," Kessler said. "Because men like us don't usually end up on opposite sides of a job like this by accident." He glanced at Warren, cowering against the wall, and something like contempt crossed his face. "Warren here hired me to make a financial problem disappear quietly. Somewhere along the way, he seems to have forgotten that quiet solutions require quiet witnesses. All of them." Warren's face went white. "Victor, we agreed. Nobody was supposed to actually get hurt." "You agreed to that," Kessler said, almost gently. "I never did. $200 million buys a great deal of silence, Warren, and silence is expensive when it has to last forever." Derek's stomach turned. Kessler wasn't just cleaning up Warren's mess. He was planning to erase everyone who knew about it, Warren included. Cole's mind raced through the math. 6 men visible, An unknown number still on lower floors, one exit, the elevator, currently blocked, and a stairwell door 40 feet behind them that Kessler's men hadn't yet secured. "You're outnumbered 6-1, soldier," Kessler said, almost kindly, as if offering Cole a chance to reconsider. "Whatever unit you came from, I respect the work you did today. But this ends now, one way or the other." Cole's eyes didn't waver. "You're right about one thing," he said quietly. "This ends now." And then every light on the executive floor went out at once. The building plunged into total darkness, the emergency lighting system failing to kick in for 3 critical seconds. 3 seconds Cole had been counting on, because he'd cut the floor's backup power conduit himself 30 seconds earlier while Kessler was busy monologuing. Gunfire erupted in the black corridor, muzzle flashes strobing like lightning. Kessler's men firing blind at where Cole had been standing a heartbeat before. He wasn't there anymore. Cole moved through the darkness the way he'd trained to for a decade. Silent, precise, using muzzle flashes as targeting beacons the way his enemies never expected their own weapons to betray them. He took the nearest gunman down with a strike to the throat, disarmed a second before he could turn, and used the man's own rifle as a battering ram against a third. Derek pressed himself flat against the wall beside Warren, both men frozen in the chaos, the sound of the fight around them more terrifying than anything Derek had ever experienced. Grunts, impacts, gunfire, and beneath it all, Cole's controlled, almost silent movement through 6 armed men in absolute darkness. The emergency lights flickered on. 4 of Kessler's men lay unconscious, or worse, on the corridor floor. Cole stood in the center of the wreckage, breathing hard, a fresh cut above his eyebrow, rifle now trained on the 2 men still standing, one of them Kessler himself. "Impressive," Kessler said, and to his credit, his voice barely shook, even with a rifle pointed at his chest. "Truly, I don't think I've seen work like that outside of a classified briefing." "Drop it," Cole said. Kessler's eyes flicked, calculating, toward Derek and Warren pressed against the wall, and toward something Cole hadn't accounted for. A red dot bloomed on Cole's chest from the stairwell doorway behind him. "I wouldn't," Kessler said softly. "If I were you, my last man just got here, and unlike me, he's not interested in a professional conversation about tactics." Cole didn't turn. He didn't need to. He'd already clocked the angle in his peripheral vision, already calculating the half-second it would take to close the distance if the man in the stairwell hesitated even slightly. "Then we're at a standoff," Cole said. "No," Kessler said, almost sadly, raising his own rifle now that the odds had shifted back in his favor. "We're at the part where I stop being polite." Time slowed the way it always did for Cole in moments like this. A clarity that had kept him alive through a decade of situations most people would never survive. 2 rifles aimed at him. One from Kessler, 6 feet away. One from the stairwell 20 feet behind, held by a man he couldn't see clearly enough to read. He had less than a second to act, and in that second, an old instinct, the same one that had once pulled 2 wounded men out of a burning building against every rule of self-preservation, took over completely. He didn't go for his own weapon. He shoved Derek and Warren both hard to the floor behind the reception counter of the executive suite, using his own body as the last barrier between them and the gunfire that erupted a heartbeat later. 2 shots, then a third. Cole felt the impact against his side like a hammer blow, hot and sudden, and the world tilted. But he was already moving, twisting through the pain, bringing his own rifle up and firing 2 controlled shots toward the man in the stairwell doorway before his vision could fully clear. The man dropped. Kessler, alone now, hesitated for exactly 1 fatal second. The first hesitation Cole had seen from him all day, staring at the wounded soldier who had just taken a bullet to save 2 men who, until an hour ago, had never even known his name. "Why?" Kessler said, genuinely bewildered. rifle still raised. "Would you take a bullet for a man who called you worthless an hour ago?" Cole, blood soaking through his jacket, rifle steady despite the pain screaming through his ribs, looked at Kessler with the same flat calm he'd had all day. "Because that's the job," Cole said, "even when nobody's paying me for it." And then, from behind the reception counter, Derek Salinger, the same man who had mocked a delivery driver for a cold sandwich less than 2 hours earlier, rose to his feet, drove his shoulder into Kessler's back with every ounce of desperate strength his terrified body had left, and slammed the man face first into the marble floor, hard enough to knock the rifle from his grip. Cole finished it a second later, disarming Kessler completely and pinning him down with the last of his strength. For a moment, the executive floor of Ashgrove Tower went completely, deafeningly silent. Then, from below, muffled through concrete and glass, came the sound Derek had never in his life been so relieved to hear. Sirens, dozens of them, and the heavy mechanical thud of a SWAT breach team finally moving in. Below them, on the floors Cole had already cleared or bypassed, the 10 remaining gunmen holding the lobby and hostage floors surrendered within minutes of the breach, leaderless the moment Kessler's radio went silent, and unwilling to trade their lives for a paycheck that was never going to reach them now. 3 tried to run through the parking garage and were caught before they reached the street. The rest simply raised their hands when the first SWAT flashlight hit their chests. By the time SWAT reached the 40th floor, Kessler was zip-tied with his own men's restraints. Warren was curled against the wall in silent, broken tears, and Cole Bishop was sitting with his back against the reception counter, one hand pressed hard against his bleeding side, breathing in slow, controlled pulls the way he'd been trained to manage pain that would have dropped most men to the floor. Derek knelt beside him, gripping his good shoulder, his own hands shaking. "Stay with me," Derek said, voice cracking. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." "I've had worse," Cole said through gritted teeth, and somehow, impossibly, there was the faintest trace of dry humor in it. "You saved my life," Derek said, "twice. After everything I said to you." "Forget what you said," Cole said. "It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me," Derek said, echoing, without realizing it, the exact words Cole had used to him hours earlier. "I've spent my whole life deciding who matters and who doesn't, based on what they can do for me. I looked right through you every single day for months. I never once asked your name." Cole's eyes, pained but clear, met his. "It's Cole," he said. "Cole Bishop." "Derek," Derek said, and it came out strange and small, an introduction between 2 men who had already been through more together than most people experience in a lifetime, made only now, at the very end of it. SWAT medics arrived moments later, moving Cole onto a stretcher despite his tired protests that he was fine, that he'd walked out of worse than this. Derek walked beside the stretcher all the way to the elevator, refusing to let go of his hand, ignoring the reporters already gathering outside the plaza, ignoring the flashing lights and shouted questions. Warren was led out in handcuffs behind them, head down, unable to meet the eyes of the employees he'd nearly gotten killed. Iris Calloway was waiting at the police perimeter when they emerged, tears streaming down her face at the sight of Cole alive, bloodied but breathing. "I told you not to die in there," she said, voice breaking. "Wasn't planning to," Cole managed, and even strapped to a stretcher, exhausted and bleeding, there was something steady in his eyes that hadn't wavered once through the entire ordeal. Derek watched the paramedics load Cole into the ambulance, and as the doors began to close, he stepped forward. "Whatever you need," Derek said. "Whatever it costs, I owe you a life. I intend to spend the rest of mine paying it back, starting today." Cole looked at him for a long moment. "Start by remembering the name of the next person you think is beneath you," Cole said quietly. "That'll be payment enough." The ambulance doors closed, and it pulled away into the flashing lights of a city that had no idea, yet, just how close it had come to losing 40 floors of its people to a fraud two men had built out of pride and covered up with blood. But down in that lobby, in a security office nobody had checked yet, a second phone, one Kessler had used to communicate with whoever had truly financed this operation, sat quietly on a desk, still receiving messages from a number no one in that building had ever heard of. The screen lit up once, in the empty room, with a single line no one was there yet to read. Status? Is it done? 3 hours later, Derek Salinger sat in a hard plastic chair outside a private room at Northwestern Memorial, still wearing a shirt stained with someone else's blood, refusing every offer from hospital staff to leave and clean up. Through the small window in the door, he could see Cole propped up in a hospital bed, an IV in one arm, a thick bandage wrapped around his ribs where the bullet had grazed him deep enough to need 11 stitches, but by some miracle the surgeon called pure luck, and Cole called an inch to the left, had missed anything vital. Iris Calloway sat beside Derek, quiet for a long time before she finally spoke. "You know this isn't over," she said. Derek turned to her, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "Warren's in custody. Kessler's in custody. The audit files are with the FBI. What else is there? Kessler didn't build a 16-man team and stockpile military-grade weapons on Warren's salary," Iris said quietly. "COOs don't have that kind of cash lying around, even ones stealing $200 million. Someone financed this, someone with real money and real reach, and that person is still out there." Derek's stomach turned. He thought of the message he didn't know about yet, the one sitting on a phone in an empty security office, glowing quietly in the dark, waiting for an answer that would never come from the men who were supposed to send it. "You think Warren was working for someone else," Derek said slowly. "I think Warren was scared enough to hire Kessler," Iris said. "But I don't think Warren was ever the one steering this. Men like him panic and cover tracks. They don't commission private military contractors with the kind of precision we saw today. Someone else wanted this done, and wanted it done exactly this way." Derek looked back through the window at Cole, who had drifted into an uneasy, medicated sleep, his hand still curled loosely as if it were still gripping a rifle. "Then we're not done," Derek said. "No," Iris said. "I don't think we are." A monitor beside Cole's bed spiked into a sharp, rhythmic alarm. Through the glass, Derek watched Cole's body go rigid, back arching off the mattress, the bandage at his side darkening fast, and two nurses shoved past Derek into the room, shouting for a doctor before he could even get the door open. "Something's wrong," Derek said, already moving. "Iris, something's wrong with him." Detective Anna Whitcomb of the Chicago PD's Major Crimes Unit stood in the darkened security office on the ground floor of Ash Grove Tower, gloved hands carefully bagging the phone Kessler's men had left behind in the chaos of their retreat. The screen was still lit. "Status? Is it done?" She stared at the message for a long moment, then turned to the young officer beside her. "Get this to cybercrimes tonight," she said. "I want to know whose number sent it, and I want to know before the 11 o'clock news finishes calling this a robbery gone wrong." "You don't think it was a robbery?" the officer asked. Whitcomb glanced around the wrecked lobby, the shattered glass, the blood on the marble, the precision of the breach points that told her, without a doubt, this had been planned for months by people who did this for a living. "Robbers don't leave 4 unconscious men behind and disappear into a locked-down building's back stairwells without a trace," she said. "Robbers don't have an extraction plan for when things go wrong. Whoever sent that message wasn't asking about cash. They were asking about a man." She looked down at the phone again, at the small green ellipsis that appeared for a moment. Someone, somewhere, was typing a reply, before it vanished without sending anything at all. Whoever was on the other end had realized, in that instant, that the line was no longer safe. "Bag it," Whitcomb said, and put a rush on every financial record tied to Ashgrove Capital. Whoever paid for this isn't finished just because tonight didn't go their way. 2 weeks after the siege at Ashgrove Tower, and 12 days after emergency surgery caught the internal bleeding the ER had missed the first time, Cole Bishop stood outside the same building, no longer wearing a delivery jacket, his ribs still tender under a button-down shirt Derek had insisted on buying him. "The least I can do," Derek had said, though they both knew it wasn't close to the least. The lobby had been repaired. New glass, new marble where the old had cracked under gunfire. But Cole noticed things most people wouldn't. The new security cameras covering every angle of the maintenance corridors. The reinforced stairwell doors. The guards who now checked identification with real attention instead of glancing bored at badges. Derek met him at the entrance, dressed down for once, no tie, no $1,000 suit. "The board wants to make a formal announcement," Derek said. "About what really happened. About Warren. About the fraud. Iris thinks it'll tank the stock for a quarter, maybe 2. Will it?" Cole asked. "Probably," Derek said. "I don't care anymore. I spent 9 years building a company on the assumption that the people underneath me didn't matter as much as the people above me. That almost got everyone in this building killed." He paused. "I want to offer you a job. Head of corporate security, real authority, real salary. Whatever you need." Cole was quiet for a moment, looking up at the 40 floors of glass and steel that had nearly become his grave 2 weeks earlier. "I'll think about it," he said. "But Derek, this isn't over. Whoever financed Kessler is still out there. The police haven't traced that message yet. Somebody wanted you dead badly enough to spend a fortune making it look easy, and that kind of money doesn't just walk away because one operation failed." Derek's face tightened. "Then what do we do?" Cole looked at him. Really looked. The way he hadn't bothered to when Derek was just a name attached to a cold sandwich complaint 2 weeks and a lifetime ago. "We find out who they are," Cole said, "before they decide to try again." Behind them, unnoticed by either man, a black sedan idled across the street from Ashgrove Tower, its driver watching the entrance through tinted glass, a phone pressed to his ear. "They're both still alive," the driver said quietly into the phone. "Bishop's back at the building. Salinger, too." A pause. Then, on the other end of the line, a voice neither Cole nor Derek would ever have recognized gave a single calm instruction before the call ended. "Then we wait for a better opportunity. This isn't finished, not by a long way." The sedan pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the flow of downtown traffic, leaving Cole Bishop standing in front of Ashgrove Tower with no idea that the war he thought he'd ended 2 weeks ago had only just begun. In a federal holding facility 20 miles outside the city, Victor Kessler sat alone in an interview room, hands cuffed to the table, watching the 2 agents across from him with the same unbothered patience he'd shown a rifle pointed at his own chest. "You're facing kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and enough federal charges to keep you in a cell until you're a very old man," the lead agent said. "Your only way out of a life sentence is telling us who financed the operation. We know Warren Ellery didn't have the money or the connections to hire a team like yours. Someone else paid for this. We want a name." Kessler said nothing for a long moment, studying the agent with mild, almost curious interest. "You're asking the wrong question," he finally said. "Then what's the right one?" Kessler leaned back as far as the cuffs would allow, a faint, humorless smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Ask yourselves why a man like me, with my resources, would ever agree to work for someone as small and frightened as Warren Ellery in the first place," Kessler said. "Ask yourselves what Warren actually had to offer me, beyond a fraction of $200 million that I never had any intention of letting him keep." The agents exchanged a glance. "You're saying Warren wasn't your real employer?" the second agent said slowly. "I'm saying," Kessler said, voice quiet and unreadable, that Warren Ellery thinks he hired me, and a man like Derek Salinger thinks his old friend betrayed him for money. Both of them are wrong about who they're really dealing with. But I've said enough for one day." He leaned back, closed his eyes, and said nothing more, not one word, for the rest of the interview, leaving both agents with a single, unshakable certainty. Whoever had truly orchestrated the siege of Ashgrove Tower was still out there, untouched, unnamed, and very much still watching. And somewhere across the city, in an office with no name on the door, a phone buzzed once with a single incoming message, read and deleted within seconds by hands no one would ever be able to trace. Kessler's holding, as expected, moved to phase 2,